This is the Hiking Thru Life podcast. We've all been gifted a journey called life. Let's see where the journey leads us today. Welcome to the Hiking Thru Life podcast, where we talk with people who in some way, shape, or form have been influenced by the outdoors. I'm Andy, the producer of this podcast, and my lovely wife Sarah will be your host. Together, we make up Hiking Thru Life.
This podcast is all about bringing all kinds of people who are inspired by the outdoors and sharing their stories.
We hope that by sharing people's stories, it inspires others to get out and live a more meaningful life. Tune in every week for new episodes, or better yet, subscribe to the Hiking Thru Life podcast on your favorite podcast provider. If you enjoy this podcast, please share it with others. Also, if you have a story to share, or know of anyone who might be interested in being a guest on this podcast, head on over to hikingthrulife.net/podcast and get in touch with us. Now sit back and enjoy this week's episode. So a lot has changed over this past month, including plans for a podcast episode. Erin Egan, the host of the Hiking Thru podcast, had plans to thru-hike the Pacific Crest Trail starting today, Saturday, April 4th. We talked to her a month ago about her preparation, her excitement, and her thought process about going into this hike. Unfortunately, since we talked to her a month ago, things have changed. The world is now going through a pandemic. Not only has this affected the health of everyone, it's also impacted people's plans for the trail. Originally, this episode was going to start out like this.
We're here with Erin Egan, and she is the host of the Hiking Thru podcast, which I'm sure some hikers out there have heard of. And she kind of started that podcast to talk about all things thru hiking with thru-hikers who have done a large variety of trails. They're sharing their own trail wisdom, and she's also planning on going to hike the PCT herself in just a month. So we're super excited to talk to her and hear about her plans and her own experiences in her own life. So thank you, Erin, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
But as with life, not all things go according to plan. That was definitely the case here for Erin's hike. We found that it was more appropriate in our current state to get back in touch with Erin and get her reaction to what her hike plans are now. Fortunately, we were able to connect with her earlier this week, and we got her reaction, her emotions, and her decisions about what she's going to be doing with her Pacific Crest Trail thru hike. So stay tuned for the original interview from a month ago, following Erin's reaction from earlier this week. Before we get into the interviews, though, here are some words from Erin.
I still want to hike, obviously, but it's a new plan in terms of when that might be. And that is part of, I think, maybe the grief in it, maybe part of the anger of it. It's like, obviously something has been ripped away, but you don't even know when you will have the opportunity to make it right. One of the gifts I feel like that you get as you get older is the ability to create some space for processing things, as opposed to just instantaneously reacting or knee-jerk reactions, that kind of thing. What comes next? What do you do next? Where do you go? Do you try to do this again? How do you stay connected to the trail when you can't be doing what you wanted to do initially? Do you try to stay connected, or is that just too painful right now? And I think that in this process, in this event, in this moment, there are still a lot of things that we can learn about ourselves and the way that we have met this moment that we can carry into then the rest of our lives and our relationship with the trails, should we hopefully get another opportunity to be on them.
So, wow, a lot has happened since we last chatted.
Yeah.
Like, we chatted on March 6th, and you were like all amped up to go, having some anxieties about going. And then, like, a week later, this crazy virus happened.
Yeah, the world changed.
Seriously, in an instant. It's like, I mean, it's just affecting everyone in every way possible right now.
Yeah.
It's really hard to like wrap my head around, and I can't even imagine like what you're trying to wrap your head around right now. I mean, your whole life was about to change for 6 months.
Yeah. Right now, I don't think I'm really processing it. I'm just kind of, I mean, I know I'm not going to get on the trail, and I know that it's unlikely that this is gonna, because what I was telling myself, or what I have been telling myself, was, okay, I'm not gonna get on the trail on the 4th, but, maybe by mid-April, it'll somehow miraculously clear up, and then Trump came out with the April 30th stay-at-home thing. And that was sort of when it definitively became, okay, by the middle of April, it's not gonna clear itself up. Not that that was ever realistic anyway, but I kept telling myself that anyway. And it was funny because I was watching something yesterday. It was just a documentary film about a group of guys who did a small thru hike, like a 10-day thru hike. And actually, I should backtrack just a little. In so much as, even though I was telling myself mid-April, realistically I was like, you know what, I think my hike is done for the year. So in the back of my mind, that was always kind of floating around, right? And then yesterday I was watching this documentary and I was like, oh God, I so want to get out there. I so want to do this. I so want to, but northbound seems not realistic. And talk about a moment of new self-awareness, new learning, self-learning. Because I know a lot of people have been saying, well, by the middle of summer, maybe it'll have, cleared itself up, or it will have calmed down, and you can just kind of jump on the trail at that point, wherever that would have been in your hike, and do the rest of it. And I was thinking about that, and I realized that is not a satisfying answer for me. For some people it may work, but I realized personally for me it didn't work. So I was thinking after this documentary, I'm like, what, God, I still want to get on the trail so badly. What? I'm like, well, what about a Sobo? What about a Sobo hike? What about a Sobo hike? And so this morning I did go on to the PCT, kind of permit portal, and was just kind of looking to see what was going on there. And they basically said that they're not doing anything.
Oh yeah, I looked at it too just before I got on with you. It's just a big thing.
Yeah, they're not giving you any options to be able to do anything, to be able to try to plan for anything this summer. They're essentially holding their breaths and saying, we don't know, and we're not going to promise you anything.
Yeah, and I think like what I just read too, I think it was on backpackermagazine.com that said the permits are still valid for anybody who already had them, but they're obviously telling people not to go due to all of the risks.
Yeah. Well, and I have been watching, or have been seeing people posting on Instagram that there are a few people, a few people who are starting to hike. But it also feels like even the few people who are starting to hike, they get into Julian, or maybe they get a little bit further and they just realize that it's either not sustainable or just not a good idea at this point. And a lot of them seem to be coming off the trail.
Absolutely, because it's like once you get to those trail towns, I'm sure so many of those little shops are closed as is. And those towns are so small that a hiker wouldn't want to bring any risk into these teeny tiny towns.
Yeah. Well, it was funny last night. I was doing my laundry down in Hermosa. And I mean, it's basically shut down. You know, like there's one restaurant that's open, the laundromat is open, but everything else is basically closed. And so half jokingly, half seriously, I was telling somebody I wanted to go down there and take some video, because other than a big movie that's got a lot of money to lock the streets down, you are never going to get this vision again. But it was really eerie to see just emptiness, just quiet and emptiness. And I feel like that's probably what those small towns are going to be like, because it's just not worth, on many levels, trying to stay open.
Well, yeah, and you think about those small towns, they live and thrive off backpackers coming through in the summer. I mean, their hostels, their restaurants, their laundromats, their pizza joints that are all thriving and banking on thru-hikers.
Yeah, if nobody's on the trail, or if there's a handful of people on the trail, it's not financially viable, basically. I can't decide, though, whether it's a worse or better situation to be like me, who hasn't yet started, who, you know, wants to be out there and wants to do this, but is going to say, no, I'm not going to do this. But I'm not at least on the trail yet. So I don't have any trail miles under my feet, versus the person who is just wants it so bad that they're going to just try to start. They get, you know, 100 miles in, 200 miles in, whatever it is, and then have to come off. I almost feel like that would be harder.
Yes,
because you have the life started.
I think so too, especially if people just have this like mentality of like being so excited about doing it. I was just watching a video of a girl from Kentucky who just decided to get off the trail last Friday, I think it was. And one thing that really stood out to me that she said was, I wanted this trail to teach me things about myself. And she said something along the lines of, I'm really learning how to be flexible throughout this situation now.
Well, I mean, and being flexible is something that I hear from a lot of people, and you probably do too, you know, about just general life on the trail. You can make plans, but, you know, the trail has other plans for you. This is a different kind of flexibility, I think. It's even more of a head shake than it would normally even have been.
Right, absolutely. Because I mean, you left your job. You like everything was planned out. You were ready to go, and I'm sure you had all of your food too. What are you going to do with all your food now? I suppose you can save all of that.
You could probably save a lot of it. You know, it's pretty funny. I'm sort of almost like kind of halfway in, halfway out on the food thing. Like I do have a lot of the food, but I didn't have quite everything, because some of the stuff I was just gonna get, you know, at the last minute. So I've got a lot of bars, I've got a lot of meals, dehydrated meals and stuff like that. But things like top ramen and kind of some of those things, I was gonna just wait and grab at the very end, right before I left. Like, you can actually find top ramen right now.
Yeah, that is definitely like a golden ticket to find at the moment. That and toilet paper.
I know. It's so interesting, the things that are out at the grocery store right now. You cannot for the life of you find peanut butter right now. I mean, I half joking, but half serious. I needed to resupply my peanut butter, just personal for my house. So I went into the store and I was looking for it. And I'm a Jif Creamy girl, right? They had no Jif Creamy for the life of them, but they had Crunchy. And I was just traumatized. I bought it, but I'm still traumatized by it.
Yes. Back to that being flippable in the time of the COVID.
I know.
Totally, though. It's just like everything is just so flipped upside down right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, the progression of it. Like the first week, I feel like I personally was doing pretty good. I mean, I probably still had some faint hope of trail, but I was doing pretty good. Like I was being pretty organized. I was being pretty focused. I was being productive, quote unquote. The second week, it kind of got a little looser and, you know, that kind of thing. And today, like I got up about an hour later than I wanted to. I did my run, and then I came home and I took a shower and I laid on my bed for a couple of hours just watching YouTube.
Well, and I think so many people are experiencing that right now with everybody who's been laid off in the past few weeks and unemployed right now. Like, people don't know how to process and how to handle this.
It is pretty interesting how, this whole thing has caused us to really depend on technology to stay together, whether it's working from home or getting some sort of social fix, whatever that is needed for you personally. You see so many people doing group chats on Skype or whatever, just to try to get some semblance of connections out there.
Absolutely. Because it's just like proving to humans that we are social creatures and need that. And I'm right now feeling like more connected to a lot of people than ever. Like, I feel way more connected to my coworkers than I've ever been before. It's such a strange dynamic that we're navigating.
Yeah, we take so many things for granted.
Yeah. But it's definitely connecting people. It's just still so weird to me that we're living this because, so many other, like, it happens like every 100 years or whatever, but people,
I guess the last one was 1918.
Yeah. And like, they didn't have this much technology to navigate it. So just think of how lucky we are to have all of this technology to try to navigate this craziness.
Yeah.
Like, have you even tried to think about what your next steps are going to be now that you're officially not going to the trail?
I think at this moment, my next steps are just trying to stay present, I guess what I'm focusing on in this time is staying present, being creative, and, trying to do some work for myself, on myself, with myself, what have you, whether it's reading, studying, writing, just some sort of trying to be creative, trying to just keep that going. And, everybody asks me or keeps asking me, so what are you going to do now? And I think my best answer at this moment is right now, I'm just going to be present. And when this is over with, like when we can actually start moving around, when we can go places, I will figure out at that point what comes next. I know for myself personally, and I have a feeling probably a lot of people are in this same scenario, I work freelance. Each job is when it comes. And at this moment, basically production across the country, across the world is basically pretty much shut down. And there's no way of knowing until this is over, until we can start moving around, how many of these shows are going to even come back up again. A lot of them could just be done. A lot of TV series could just be like, okay, that's our season. We're just going to stop now. And we're just, movies could just go away. So until that happens, and until I can then take a temperature of what that is and, what work availability there is, I'm just kind of not going to worry about it.
Well, and honestly, that's probably one of the best attitudes people can have right now, because I think there is so much anxiety about the unknown and people worrying and wanting to plan out the next thing. But yeah, I think just being present is a huge gift to yourself right now, in all honesty. Yeah. I think that's what people should be doing. So kudos to you for doing that through all of this.
On one level, it's not being on the trail sucks. I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But on the flip side of that, I was prepared to be off work for the next 6 months. So I know that there are a lot of people out there who live paycheck to paycheck, who, potentially live week to week. And they have different stresses about being able to pay the bills, to be able to, live for the next month and the next month. Whereas because I was prepared to not be working for 6 months, I'm a little bit safer, honestly, strangely enough.
Well, right. When people plan for the trail, they have to save up this lump sum and plan for it. So that is a huge advantage.
Glass half full.
Well, exactly. I think we have to look at situations as a half full right now. Because if we're not, we would have a lot of negativity in this world.
Yeah.
And we know there's already enough of that.
Oh, hell yeah. And the finger pointing hasn't even started yet.
Yeah. So do you think, like, because you have all this gear now, do you think once you can start going out and moving out of this, not out of shelter in place, do you think you'll go experience some backpacking trips since you have your gear?
I probably will. I was thinking about that as well. I mean, the one luxury that I have being in LA is that the trail is fairly close. I could drive 2 hours out to the Palm Springs area and hit the junction where it goes under the 10 and just hop on, and even just doing a day hike, that's not a bad drive, actually. And so I was thinking about that, like getting the gear out and at least doing that or some variation of that, or getting up into the San Bernardino Mountains or that kind of stuff. But I guess that will, to some extent, be dependent upon what happens, what job, where am I? A lot of times I travel for work, so I won't be here, or I won't be potentially around here. There's so many things we just don't know.
I know, and it's changing like hour by hour, day by day, week by week.
Yeah, it really is. This is absolutely the strangest time that I could ever not even imagine. There are a lot of things like people say, during your lifetime. I know, like with my parents, it was like, okay, my mom was born at the end of World War II, so it was the end of the war. It was the Berlin Wall, the splitting of Germany. It was Kennedy's assassination. It was the Korean War, the Vietnam War. That you start listing all the things, and I think about during my life, like what are the things that I'll remember, like those moments that are just burned into your brain, the things like 9/11, the things like Princess Diana's death, the things like the pandemic of COVID-19, the things that just leave an impression.
Yeah. Well, and when COVID-19 was all starting, it was reminding me so much of when it turned to year 2000, when everybody felt like
the Y2K
computers were going to go wacko. Like people went out and stocked up on toilet paper and canned goods. So when all that started happening a few weeks back, that's all I could keep thinking of is this year 2000 all over again.
I forgot about Y2K. Yes.
That's exactly where my mind went.
Yeah, no, this is pretty wild. It's interesting for me personally. Again, I mean, all of this is, or I'm looking at this as ways to learn more about myself, so to speak. Some sort of positive spin, glass half full type of thing. And it was interesting because I realized that being on Instagram, watching Instagram, that kind of thing, that I was watching the people this season, who were trying to get on trail or who were trying to continue their trail if they had gotten on, and how their hikes were faring or ending, as the case may be. But it was interesting because I was also finding myself getting a little angry at the people from previous years who were posting these pictures of their trail or their being at the terminus or, what have you, and being like, oh my God, this big transformative, life-changing, momentous event thing that they're all celebrating. And I was just like, it was annoying me, honestly.
Oh, because you mean they were posting these photos like recently?
Yeah, because people's, this is the time when people start. So they're posting pictures from when they started. A year ago today, this was my first step onto the trail and things like that. And it was interesting. Again, a learning moment. It was interesting because it was annoying me that, because it was almost like this FU in your face, this is this big momentous event that you just aren't going to get. It's taken away from you type of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Social media sadly has the power to do that.
But yeah, no, it's so interesting. And like the rational, reasonable side of me is like, yay team, go, congratulations, you had this moment, it changed your life and so forth. But I think probably the person I've heard put it best right now is Have you ever heard of Glennon Doyle?
No.
She just wrote a book, or she just published a book called Untamed. But she's all about basically this community that she's been creating around herself and around this book and Together Rising and that kind of stuff. And so she's holding daily family meetings for her people, so to speak, like all these Instagram followers, social media followers and stuff like that. And the other day, she was talking about, actually, maybe it was even today, they're all just starting to blur together, but she was talking about like what you're feeling, or what people are feeling is grief. Is it some version of grief, grief for the loss of whatever it is. And her thing was, in your feeling of grief, just feel it, just be there in it, and let yourself process it, as opposed to running away from it or being afraid to acknowledge it, so to speak.
Yeah. And, I think with you saying that you're just trying to be present right now, I think that's going to be an easier thing for you to just deal with this grief of not going on the trail.
I hope so. Fingers crossed, Hail Mary, salt over the shoulder, all the rest of it.
Yeah. But yeah, that's so true. And like, I bet that there's probably like going to be this great community too that comes out of like all the hikers that were going to be going out right now, because all of you could still be connecting over social media and sharing the grief that you're all having over all of this.
Yeah. It's interesting that you say that, because that's actually probably a really good idea. It's sort of the mirror of all of the previous years, people doing their group chats. This is a version of that, and sharing the grief or that kind of thing, as opposed to trying to hold on to it or hold it in yourself, so to speak.
Well, right. Yeah. And I mean, was there some kind of Facebook group for people going out in 2020?
I'm sure that there probably is. I just am never on Facebook. But you also see, like I said, the people on like Instagram who either were talking about the devastation that they're feeling right now about not being able to do the trail, or the people who tried to start and then had to get off, and that they're posting that they're now getting off, or versions of that. So like the people are out there. You could be connecting to those people, and create a larger tramily, so to speak.
The grieving tramily.
The grieving tramily. Yeah, exactly. But actually, it is it's a good, interesting idea, which I hadn't thought about actually. Because I guess I was feeling very self-isolated, and but there is a large group of people feeling the same thing, having a same experience, that it could benefit for people to be having that experience together.
Right. Whether it be through a Zoom call or whatever.
Yeah.
A grieving Zoom call,
Like, how did your guys' plans change for the summer, so to speak?
Not like a ton. I mean, we were planning on going to do like a mini road trip, probably to like Utah in July. And we're still planning on doing that unless come July, all of this is still happening. Mm-hmm. And otherwise we were just planning, on going camping around Minnesota. And I suppose, again, that's all just kind of like a waiting game to see how things work. But yeah, all of the state parks in Minnesota, you can't reserve anything at all through the month of April. But we do have like permits to go up to the Boundary Waters canoe area in June. And we haven't heard that those are canceled yet. So we're still holding on to that, but who knows what'll happen.
Yeah. I feel like people are trying to stay positive.
Yeah,
that far out.
Yeah. But I know people have canceled like really big events like weddings and like family reunions for the summer, which is totally understandable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so interesting how this has impacted so many people in such great, huge, I should say, ways. And it will have repercussions even once people, I think, start to move around again and that kind of thing. I think it will still continue to have an impact on people.
It'll have a huge impact. And I'm just so scared for the financial impact it's going to have on our economy.
Yeah.
I mean, so many places are getting no business right now. So many people are, when this is all over, so many people are going to be competing for jobs in the market too.
Yeah. It was interesting. I was actually, that same documentary was talking about the formation of this Pacific Trail, and they
What's
were
that
talking
documentary called?
It's called Highline.
Okay.
It actually gets released on April 7th, or it goes up on streaming and that kind of stuff on April 7th. But one of the things that they do in it is give you some history about the trail that these guys are hiking on. And one of the things that they talk about is like the New Deal stuff and the CCC and the work programs that the federal government created after and around World War II to get the country working again after the Great Depression. And it's so interesting to think about our version of what will be a truly Great Depression.
I know, it's just like such a historical thing that I never thought in my lifetime I would experience this.
Yeah, I don't think that anybody did. I think everybody thought we were beyond it.
Yeah. Such an interesting thing. But it's cool to see all the communities coming together through social media. Like there was this national camping night out this Friday, and everybody was like camping in their houses and sharing their photos of it. And you would never see that stuff without this crazy pandemic happening.
Yeah, there was one woman, I think on Instagram, she goes, I think it's Fearless Sarah, who did her version of a day's hike, her 10,000 steps, whatever, basically up and around her house. And then she did it like a trip report and that kind of thing. It was pretty hysterical.
Oh, I love that.
It was pretty brilliant as a way to both get your 10,000 steps in, but also to kind of poke fun at the whole situation.
And I think that's what people have to be doing right now too, is like making some humor out of it, despite how awful it is and tragic it is in so many ways. To get through it, we have to find some fun and humor out of it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Without that, it's all just bleak and gray.
Exactly. Literally just gray out in the world. No action, no cars, no people. Eerie.
Eerie is a perfect word for it. Walking around the streets, particularly at night, I think is when I notice it even more. Like during the day, it just feels quiet, but at night, walking in the streets is just, as you said, it's eerie. It reminds me a little bit, a couple years ago, actually probably about 7 years ago, I did a trip to China. I took a tour in China, and we were in this area. I forget even what the town was, but the Chinese government had so pre-planned the influx of people coming into the city from the farms and smaller towns around in the area, that they had pre-built all of these high-rise apartments and things like that in preparation for this influx of people. And they had built roads, infrastructure, right? But at this moment, as we were driving through, the roads had literally nobody on them. They were literally just empty. And that's what I feel like a little bit right now, because everybody's in their houses. So it's quiet and empty. And in honor of that, I've been binging on The Walking Dead and and Battlestar Galactica, because I feel they're so appropriate.
Yeah, I don't watch much of either of those actually, but from what I know about The Walking Dead, I feel like it is totally appropriate for this time.
I guess in that respect, it's been kind of funny to be, who has all this time to binge watch something like that?
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, you're probably never going to have this time again. So people should just soak it up and make the most of it.
Yeah. But I think that's hard. First, I mean, obviously people feel the isolation. And as we were talking about before, there's the whole social aspect to humans. But it's almost like that the uncertainty of not knowing when things will actually be okay, when they will go back to quote unquote normal. You're almost like this, you're floating in this, I don't even know what it would be called, like this just uncertainty,
Yeah,
so it's
like an
so it's
uncertain middle space.
Yeah, so it's almost like, this is at least how I'm feeling. I'm spending all my time, all this time binge watching something or watching a lot of these TV shows, which I don't normally do. And I feel like I have all this time right now to do that. But then on the flip side of that, it's almost like, but I don't know when things will get to normal. They, at the end of April, suddenly things could get back to normal, hypothetically. And now all of a sudden, all that time that I could have been doing X, Y, or Z, I've been just binge watching something. You know what I mean? So it's like this really interesting dichotomy of what should I be doing? What am I doing? And how those things are not meeting right now.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I totally get what you're saying in that respect. Cause I think, with all this time, I too am like, there's so many like productive things I can be doing. I should be doing all these things, but sometimes I do just find myself like sitting on the couch reading a book for too many hours or scrolling on my phone for too many hours.
I know, that's been the story of my life today.
Yeah, if I could see how much more my phone use has gone up since this pandemic happened, I would probably just want to just crawl in a hole.
Yeah. But yeah, I know we had been planning to talk, and I kept kind of holding you off. I'm like, I'm not going to make a decision yet. I'm not going to make a decision yet. And then it just became inevitable.
Yeah, like the PCT called it.
Right. They basically called and said, you're not doing it.
Yeah.
You're not going anywhere. I mean, I think there's a fairly clear answer about any sort of NOBO thing. SOBO, I mean, maybe I'm being unrealistic, but there's this small glimmer of hope shining.
So why would going SOBO be allowed?
Because the starting time for SOBO hikers isn't until like late June, early July.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize it's a different start time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you got to wait until the snow in the mountains, the northern Washington mountains are down or off. So the start time is later. It's the same thing with the CDT and the Appalachian Trail as well. So there is a possibility that anybody who was planning on doing SOBO may possibly still be able to do it. Though it will be really interesting to see if it is allowed. It will be really interesting to see, like we were talking about earlier with all the trail towns and stuff, how have they survived without the influx of the NOBO? Because that's the direction that most of the hikers are going. And that's what's keeping these, as you say, the towns alive and the stores alive. And if you don't have that, if you only have SOBO hikers coming down, will the stores even be trying to stay open at that point?
Right. Like, is it even sustainable at that point? There's just so many unknowns. Well, and if people can go SOBO, like there's going to have to be some serious regulations on that because they only allow a certain number per day to start.
Yeah. PCT wise, at least it was 50. Yeah. Can you imagine that all of the mass of people that wanted to go NOBO now flipped to SOBO, and all of a sudden SOBO is the way to go? But the interesting thing about the SOBO hike, which I think is a little bit different from the CDT and the AT, to do the SOBO hike, because you can't start from the Canadian side of the border. So, on a NOBO hike, you could get up to the border, tag the monument, and then you can either stay in the United States or you can go into Canada and then come out through Vancouver and come down. But doing SOBO, you can't do that. You've got to stay in the States. So there's basically a 30-mile hike to get into the terminus before you even start your official hike.
Just a warm up.
Just a warm up. Yeah. I guess it will test how much you really mean it.
Yeah. Well, and like, how much people really want to, if they were planning on starting in April, like, and then to be starting 2 months later.
And finishing around Thanksgiving, early December, possibly.
Yeah, yeah, that would be a huge change and still something so unknown. So if that did become an option, you would definitely do it? Is that what I'm hearing?
No.
No.
Um, Honestly, at this moment, I don't even know. The idea is intriguing. The idea is very interesting. The idea lights me up when all hope was gone. It brings back hope. But realistically, I don't know. I don't know because of work. I don't know because of the way that going NOBO, at least on the PCT, is hiking through Washington is not easy or simple, and one of the things that I had been counting on going SOBO or going NOBO was that my body, my poor 50-year-old body, would have an opportunity to get its hiking legs, to get hiking strong before I hit the Sierras, before I hit the mountains. Versus if you're going SOBO, that's where you start. Like you just right out of the gate, in the mountains, doing the elevation, doing the ascents and descents, right out. And I don't know. I don't know if my body would be ready for that. I don't know if it's a smart thing for me to do.
Yeah, that's a huge change. I mean, just like, because like the training you've been doing is different. And like you said, your body might not be able to handle it. There's so much to consider there.
Yeah.
But again, it's like not even an option at the moment. So
Right. And that's, I guess, the other side of it as well. I have a feeling that when we are able to start moving around does not mean that the PCTA or the CDTA or the ATC or any of those guys will just immediately open the trails up. So there'll still be this unknown period where you don't know what the hiking season on these trails is really going to look like. And do you at that moment not try to find a job and hold out with the hope that they will open the trails and allow you to start to hike during the normal SOBO season? Or do you say, you know what, I'm going to just kind of set it aside for this year. I'm going to let it be what it is. I'm going to set it aside. I'm going to go to work and earn some money and look at it next year. Probably for me, it's probably not next year. It's probably a couple years out again. Yeah, I just don't know.
So it wouldn't be next year?
I don't think so realistically. And this is the thing, and I know that all of the people who had been planning to get onto the trail and all the people who have done the trails in the past, it's quite a feat to, and even Andy and you, and in the miniaturized version of the trail that he did, like it's quite a feat to schedule and plan and prepare for and get everything in place in your life to just be able to sort of drop off the face of the earth for a period of time. And I just don't know that it's going to be realistic for me to be able to just do that again so quickly. I still want to hike, obviously, but it's a new plan in terms of when that might be. And that is part of, I think, maybe the grief in it, maybe part of the anger of it. It's like, obviously something has been ripped away, but you don't even know when you will have the opportunity to make it right.
Yeah. God, I think that really sets the tone for it. If that's not a good way to put it, I don't know what it is. It's a dark way to put it, but it's the truth.
Yeah.
Oh. And what about your podcast? Are you still going to be continuing the podcast? I mean, there's plenty of thru-hikers that you could keep talking to.
Yeah, that is my intention at this point. What's pretty entertaining to me is that in preparation for being on the trail, I have stored up or banked right now probably 10, maybe even a little bit more podcast or episodes, essentially, that I've recorded and done, because I was basically just trying to get as many in as possible before I left. And so what is actually pretty funny, or it entertains me at least in the scheme of things, which is that I've been putting the episodes out in the order that they were recorded. so you kind of hear my transition through the process of what's happening, but the ones that I recorded a week and a half ago won't come out until May or June.
You'll have to put like a little disclaimer.
Yeah, over everything. This was recorded back in February, so bear this in mind. Anything that I have to say about the trail is probably moot at this point, but yeah, I feel like I do still want to continue to do the podcast. I've really enjoyed doing the podcast and talking to these people, and the podcast. And I don't remember if we talked about this initially or not in that kind of the first version of this episode.
The pre-virus episode.
Exactly. The pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
But the podcast, my podcast, has sort of evolved from a lot of gear talk and that kind of thing to more stories, to more having people come on and tell their stories about their experiences on the trail and the ways that the trail moved them and transformed them and changed them. And that stuff, the story times, I love hearing people's stories, and I love giving people a space to tell their stories to a wider audience than just their family or just the people that they know personally.
And I think that's, yeah, I mean, I don't see why you couldn't keep doing that. But it's so interesting how like it's progressed for you over time and how it's going to be now if you continue it going forward, how you'll work your grieving through the episodes. That'll be an interesting transition as well.
Yeah, it will. I don't even know how that will look. And what's interesting as well is like the plan for me when I was going to be on the trail was, to talk to people on the trail with me and do sort of half-hour kind of type episodes and things like that. But also at points when there wasn't somebody around me to just do episodes myself, and just talk about like my experiences and stuff like that. And right now, me talking to you is sort of my version of that as of this moment.
Yeah, totally. Just like the in the moment true feelings.
Yeah, exactly.
It would be so cool if they like created a documentary on the grieving thru-hikers of 2020.
I think it would be it's a really interesting thing, but I feel like it's also probably a really interesting topic in so much as it's a microcosm of this larger thing that's going on.
Yeah, I think it could be a thing. You're in production, make it happen.
There we go. Yeah, I'll just start reaching out to these people.
That's your project.
I've got the podcast. Exactly. I've got the podcast avenue to reach out to people and say, hey, would you mind coming on and talking about da 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 da.
Yeah, I think it could be really, really good stuff. Well, and like as much as people are probably sick about talking about COVID-19, it's just it's everywhere and you can't really escape the topic of it. But by putting like a hiker spin on it, it would probably catch a certain audience's attention.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think also, and this will be something that evolves in the next couple of months or next 6 months or whatever, but also the side of it of the grieving process of not being able to do what you had been planning for so long to do. But then the second piece of, well, what do you do next? Like you were asking me, well, what comes next? What do you do next? Where do you go? Do you try to do this again? How do you stay connected to the trail when you can't be doing what you wanted to do initially? Do you try to stay connected, or is that just too painful right now?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many questions for that. Like what do you do with this 5 months? This 5 months that you had blocked out of your life, essentially.
Yeah.
A lot of people's reactions would probably kind of be yours right now. I don't know. I don't know how many times you've said that in this episode, but
I know. I just don't know.
I think that's everybody's like most used words this past couple weeks.
It will be a really interesting dynamic to see. Like, as you said, right now, everybody's talking about COVID-19. Everybody's talking about that. But very rarely, except maybe Glennon Doyle, is anybody talking about how they're feeling about it or how it's impacting them personally or their community or their family? You know, all of the feelings that are associated with what is happening to everybody and everybody's personal experiences with it. And that's going to be a process, I think, that will leave a lot of marks on people's psyche, you know?
I think so too. And that's something that worries me, just like the psychological well-being of people after all of this. It's going to be a long healing process, I think.
Yeah. Well, and not to doubt people, but I mean, realistically, how many people in their day-to-day lives, in their day-to-day experiences of the world, talk about their feelings in such a way that they can actually process it?
Exactly. It's often just like going through the motions of it, but there's not necessarily a space for them to process through what's actually happening. But like right now, I feel like that's all people have is like time to be processing things. I mean, that's how I feel like I have so much time right now.
I know. I completely agree with you.
It's just been the strangest transition. And I have an issue with not like moving as much as I used to. Like I can't sit for more than like 20 minutes at a time, and it like is driving me crazy.
Yeah, no, it's a thing. I mean, and that is like the one thing that I'm trying to make sure, regardless of how productive or whatever that I am for the rest of the day, the one thing that I'm trying to make sure that I do is some sort of exercise, run, you know, weights, strength, something, but just something to make me feel like I'm sort of at least taking care of myself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that that's another thing that scares me about just humanity and all of this. Like, are enough people taking care of themselves physically and mentally through all of this?
Yeah, I know. I was joking. So as we've said, I'm production. I do, you know, film and TV and what have you. And I was just envisioning like doing short films or kind of a thing. And you have the version where, you know, you put like this chyron that says day one, and you have somebody who, you know, gets up at the right time when they would normally have gone to work, and they go and they take their shower and they do their cleanup and they get nicer clothes on, and they're productive and they're active and they're, you know, whatever. And then the next day it's fine. And then you skip forward to the end of the week and it's slipped a little, but it's still pretty much on target. You get into the second week and the third week. And then, you know, and then at some point it's basically just somebody getting up, looking at themselves in the mirror, and it's just the same clothes day after day after day, week after week.
That's totally been me.
Yeah, but it's like, it's this thing that I think a lot of people are feeling and doing. You know what I mean? Like there's a funny side to it, and it's relatable, but there's also like this sad side of it too.
I know, like we're like lacking just like self-care, and like there's no reason to really get ready, and why shower?
I know, right?
I like joked to my husband, Andy, I was like, well, you know, like we're used to being stinky when we hike, so how is this any different?
Exactly. You're prepping it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and like you have all this food, so like you're good. Like if the grocery stores don't have food, like you're pretty stocked on all your backpacking food, I suppose, that you were going to take on the trail.
I know. It's not the most appetizing stuff.
Yeah, it's probably like candy and dehydrated.
It's dehydrated this and bars that, and the candy was the first thing that went. But I think that was sort of the indicator to me when of whether or not I thought that my hike was going to happen or not, was that I got into the candy first. You know, the hot tamales were the first thing that I ate. The Sour Patch Kids were the next thing that went. You know, that kind of thing.
Eating my feelings.
Exactly. But I don't really need this, so I'm just gonna snack.
Yep. That's another thing that humans are just doing, like going to their fridges so much more often right now.
I know.
Oh my gosh. I eat so much more just because I'm bored. It's out of boredom.
Yeah. As you said, eat your feelings.
Yeah. Yeah. Nothing to do. Let's see what I can graze for.
I know, right? sounds good right now.
Uh-huh. The one thing that I do love is how much people are like, there's so many people outside, which is awesome to see people like getting out there, but it's like just making the trails so busy. Like a lot of our local trails and just parks have been swarming with people.
In California, they've closed a lot of trails. They've closed the beaches. So there, people are on the streets kind of hiking around and that kind of thing, but it seriously diminished because there was a lot of people that would go to the Strand and walk in the mornings or that kind of thing. And I don't know where they're going now because they're not on some of the other little paths that are around.
Yeah, well, and being outside is like still encouraged for people. So, I mean, that's the only thing that's really encouraged to go do right now.
Yeah. I feel like you have to get outside, even if, like today I went and I did my run and then I came back up to my house and I've got this little sort of pseudo garden-y thing in my front yard. And I just copped a squat, just sat down and just sat there for an hour just to be outside, just to hear the birds and, see the greenery and feel the sun on my skin and, that kind of thing. And that in and of itself was kind of restorative.
Oh, absolutely. Well, and if we're confined to just our houses right now, you need that sunlight, you need that daylight. It's so good for your well-being. And so many scientific-based research behind that shows that. And yeah, if people aren't doing that right now, that's only just hurting our society even more.
It's feeding into, I think, the general depression.
Yeah. I know, because I still see a lot of people posting like very negative things about this. And I don't know, I just think that the more ways you can spin it positive, the better off we're going to be in the end when this is all over.
I agree. Being negative is not helping anything or anyone at this point. No, but I think that I really like your idea. Like I had been, I guess distancing is probably a good word. I had been watching people from a distance, them grieving, them not being on the trail or getting on the trail and then having to come off of it and that kind of stuff, and just kind of keeping a tally of people, but hadn't really been reaching out to people. And from this conversation, I think that would be a good idea, both for me and possibly for them, and building that community. We become the tramleys, the trail community.
Tramley.
Yeah, the grieving tramley, but the trail community for 2020. It's a different version of it. In some respects, it's almost more important to have those connections this year than other years.
Yeah, I think that I think you could do a lot with reaching out to people and talking to them through your podcast. I think it's a really good idea.
Yeah.
You
What
should
a
do
brilliant
it.
idea, Sarah.
Good. I'm glad I've motivated you.
We've had a little therapy session here.
Yes. I think that the more positivity that comes out of this, the better.
Yeah.
I'm a glass half full type of person, clearly.
No, absolutely.
Well, this has been an interesting combo. I'm glad that we could get you again and hear this crazy perspective.
Yeah.
Interesting times.
And hopefully, hopefully people who listen to this or hear it, hopefully it will maybe help some people, or maybe it'll make them think about some things or talk about it. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's my hope, because I think there's just a lot of questions right now about this topic. So people hearing it from a person firsthand who's going through it will maybe find a deeper connection and more meaning to it.
Yeah.
And reach out to you and find that community.
There we go. We're going to find this community one way or another.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being flexible with this and postponing, I guess, the episode a little bit.
Yeah. All right, well, go have a relaxing evening. Don't forget self-care during this time.
You too.
And now here's our first interview with Erin from a month ago.
We're here with Erin Egan, and she is the host of the Hiking Thru podcast, which I'm sure some hikers out there have heard of. And she kind of started that podcast to talk about all things through hiking with thru-hikers who have done a large variety of trails. They're sharing their own trail wisdom. And she's also planning on going to hike the PCT herself in just a month. So we're super excited to talk to her and hear about her plans and her own experiences in her own life. So thank you, Erin, for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Before any of this, was like hiking ever an interest in your life at all?
Hiking was a thing that I did when I was younger. When I say younger, I mean literally knee-high to a grasshopper younger. It was something that we would do as a family. My mom would take us up. I grew up in the Cascades, or the foothills of the Cascade Mountains. So literally you could go up Tumwater Canyon and hike, cross the river, and you'd be in the enchantments fairly shortly. And so it was all right there. And so we would do hikes, overnight, camping, that kind of stuff, as a family when I was growing up. But since then, not a bloody thing.
All right, so not a thing, but you have some athletic background.
I do, but I mean, let's be honest. Most of my athletic background, other than doing longer distance Ironman, half Ironman type triathlons, is all organized sports. It's basketball, it's softball, it's tennis, it's volleyball, it's little league, it's all of that type of thing, which is much different. And hopefully you're not getting the dog right now. But anyway, it's very different than the through hiking or even backpacking and camping and that kind of thing. But certainly, I guess triathlon has sort of prepared me a little bit for, continuing to go even after it starts to hurt. And I specifically reference my Ironman in that statement.
Yeah, well, I can imagine that being an athlete, that does somewhat help the mindset a little bit, that you're going to have to keep going. Because, my husband was an athlete through high school, and you talked to him about his Superior Hiking Trail through hike, and he kind of just has this mentality of well, you just got to keep going. And I played sports, but I don't consider myself an athlete by any means. So I don't necessarily I don't have that mindset. I've never really had that mindset.
It's a foreign mindset.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I mean, there is something with being an athlete your entire life. And certainly probably the biggest thing for me that has helped me right now in terms of preparing for the trail. So I'm sure other things will help me once I'm on the trail, but in this preparation area, probably the biggest thing that's helped me from being an athlete my entire life is I know my body. I know physically what my body does. I know, it's the cliche term, but I know the difference, what my body feels like between being hurt and being injured. So my challenge right now has been, because I got back from the Philippines and have had to sort of thrust myself into prep mode again. So I'm kind of walking a really fine line right now in terms of trying to prepare physically for it, but not injure myself. And having that history of athletics and physical activity and that kind of stuff has certainly helped with that, because it's a very fine line when you're trying to get ready at 50 as fast as I am trying to get ready.
Yeah, and from reading, it sounded like you have had some previous injuries. And then
absolutely.
You said Philippines. I want to hear about this Philippines trip too. But yeah, so what injuries have you had? And are those gonna affect your hike at all?
That, I think, is the $1 million question. I don't know yet. But it certainly affects my training. I blew out my knee playing basketball. From that, I've torn my calf muscle. I've twisted my ankles millions of times. I have issues in my hips, which affects, sometimes my back. It's all a chain. It's all connected. And that has certainly, impacted how I train and how carefully, and I think also turning 50 this year affects it as well, but how carefully I train, in terms of, do I go out and walk today, or do I run today? Do I self-impose a recovery day? At this point, honestly, I'm training 7 days a week.
And when you say running, are you planning on running any of the trail?
No, but from a cardio perspective, I'm trying to gain, cardio, endurance, that kind of thing. But no, I don't plan on getting out there with this nice heavy pack on my back and running.
Okay. I mean, there's plenty of people that do that.
True. But usually when they're running, it's in Oregon, Northern California, Oregon, after they've been on the trail for a few months.
Yeah. Or they're like very supported and have
Yes.
people carrying their.
True. They're slack packing.
Yes. Exactly. Okay. So, and yeah, so your pack, you said a heavy pack, so you're not going to be lightweight packing.
Well, heavy is a relative term too. As I'm finding out, because I'm in trying to prepare for this, I have not my pack, but a pack on my back sometimes when I'm going for a walk, which is maybe 7 to 10 pounds, which is obviously not even as heavy as the pack will be. And I feel it when I'm done. My feet feel it, my body feels it. So by the time you get in, 25, 30 pounds, which is a normal size pack, honestly, for thru-hikers, it's going to be a thing.
Yeah. And I mean, when you're training, do you have a typical number of miles per day you're walking?
When I'm walking with the pack right now, it is usually around 6 or 7 miles. And when I'm not with a pack, or when I just have like a water bladder type of thing that I'm walking or running, I'm probably going around 10 miles.
Okay. And then, I mean, it's so hard to, as like thru-hikers, like you can say you want to like do a certain number of miles per day on the trail, but I think that's all going to be relative too. Once you're out there, like you kind of go by how you're feeling.
Yeah. But I kind of know, I think I know where your question is heading, which is, what are my plans for mileage?
Yeah.
So my goal would be to average 17 to 20 miles a day. And that should put me finished probably beginning of September. So that is the plan. But my plan at the beginning is probably first day, second day doing, 10 miles. That would get me to Lake Morena the second day, that type of thing. But taking it very slowly and working up to it. Being honest with what I can accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. Easing your body into it. And like you said, knowing your body, you know your body really well, you said. So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I think that's like the biggest part. And like, I think that's where so many people kind of struggle, is they push themselves so much at the beginning.
You're so excited. It's very much like a race in any athletic endeavor, but certainly I know I would feel that in triathlon. You're so excited about the race. You're so excited about starting, almost to the extreme that the adrenaline is flowing, the endorphins are flowing. You get cotton mouth. You're so ready to go. And you almost a little bit have to burn it off before you settle in. And knowing that, I'm going to try to hold back my endorphins, my go crazy, because I've got so much energy right now type of thing, and try to be reasonable about it. But we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. Never know until you get on there. Oh, okay. So you said you have this like giant list in your bedroom. Like what does that look like? I mean, so like what did you do today, for instance, to plan for your hike?
What did I do today?
What did you check off that list?
I recorded a podcast this morning, and because basically I'm trying to get as many podcasts stored up as possible before I leave, because I want to continue the podcast while I'm gone. And then once I'm on the trail and those run out, I'll probably try to also do podcasts from the trail, but probably more like half-hour ones. So I'm storing up there. So I did a podcast this morning. I exercised this morning. And so I have a phone that has a lot of stuff on it. And so one of the things that I need to do is download the photos and stuff like that to really clear out the memory. It's a silly thing, but that is one of the things that's on my list, actually. And so I'm in the process of trying to do that.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's like things like that just like all these small
Detail.
little, the small tasks. Okay, and so you're going to continue the podcast while you're out there. And so are you going to be finding people on the trail to interview?
Yeah.
And are you going to be doing like your own updates? Like, is that the half-hour, like your little half-hour episodes you were talking about yourself?
I mean, we'll see how it ends up. My plan right now would be the half hour is a little bit of talking to somebody as well as doing an update, myself personally. But I also plan on doing updates, on Instagram. Maybe we'll see how ambitious I am, maybe trying to do some sort of vlog. So the podcast episodes don't necessarily need to be specifically about my updates type of thing. It really still is about the people who are out there and the stories and their adventures, their journeys.
Yeah, awesome. And that's like so like your podcast is just so awesome to listen to. And that's what I love about it. It's just like this collection of like what life is like on the trail and people's actual like human experiences with the trail. Like you really dive into that. I mean, yes, you talk about all the prep and everything, but there's so much more to a person's experience on the trail.
Yeah. It's been an interesting evolution for me in terms of the podcast, because originally it did very much start out about gear and that kind of stuff. But there's only so many times you can talk about a tent or a pair of shoes or whatever. And it has very much evolved into what I hope is a forum for people to tell their stories about through hiking, about the evolution of themselves while through hiking.
Isn't that so cool how things just evolve?
Yeah.
That's so cool. And did you start it a year ago?
A little over a year ago. I am so next week will be episode 62.
And when you started this, like it was all with intention of heading out for your 50th birthday on the PCT?
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking about doing this. I've been planning to do this since 2017. So, I've sort of stated the intention in the universe in general since 2017. And then, and this is a little bit of the bio as well, but in that year, a cousin of a friend had done the PCT, which was Mama Lion. And he introduced us, and I got the opportunity to sit with her for a couple of dinners and literally pick her brain. And it was the absolutely most fun I've had in so long. And the podcast really came out of that because it was so much fun to sit there and pick her brain about both geeking out about gear and food and all of that, but also just hearing the stories about the trail and the adventures on the trail, the journey. The podcast became an evolution of, okay, I want an excuse to talk to more people about this because this was so much fun. And I'm assuming that there are other people who would be interested in this sort of information as well. How can I match those two things together? Voila, a podcast was created.
Yeah. And yeah, I read that in your bio too, and that's all it takes. Just like one little conversation to spark this aha.
Right. That's the thing that's so amazing about the thru hiking community is it, even as many thousands of people as have done these different trails, it's still so small that more often than not, I will talk to somebody and they know other people that I've already talked to, or that I'm going to talk to, or they were on the trail at the same time that somebody else even though I don't know it at the time, in the course of the conversation, it comes out that, they were on the trail when somebody else was on the trail and they crossed paths and they happened to talk and da 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 da. And, I literally just had it the other day when I spoke with BrazilNet, and she was talking about doing the GDT. And I mean, I knew that Peanut was out there as well, but I hadn't, thought about the fact that they may have crossed paths. But lo and behold, yes, they did. And I've spoken to both of them, and it is just so random, but so awesome.
Yeah, the community that the outdoors and the trail brings together. Because I mean, there's only so many people out on the trail, and yeah, it's likely that these people are craving conversation when they're out there.
Yeah. Particularly if they're doing something like a Sobo hike or something where they're very much alone.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Are you worried about being like in your own head for so long? And because you're doing this solo, correct?
I am doing this solo, but I'm literally going to tell you the same thing that I'm telling all of my friends who are like, you're going with somebody, right? I'm like, no, I'm doing this solo. But I also know that there are 50 people who probably will start the same day that I do. There are 50 people who started the day before I started. There were 50 people that started the day and the day and the day and the week and the month before that. And there will be 50 people who will start for the next month after I go. So I have a sneaking suspicion, particularly at the beginning of the trail, that it will be alone time that will be more difficult to find than community time.
Mm-hmm. People are trying to form their tramilies.
Yeah, exactly. Well, people are trying to form their tramilies, but I think it very much is like being a kid at kindergarten, where you show up the first day, you're 5 years old and you're looking around and like, who's going to be my friend here? Who can I talk to so I don't feel left out? I don't feel alone with it, and so people start, it feels like pretty quickly finding the people that they gel with, because there's so many stories about people who meet this person that they end up hiking most of the trail with on the first day or the first week or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you hear those stories all the time. And then, I mean, sometimes those people they won't hike together for a couple days, but they always end up being back together.
Yeah.
And that happens to pretty much all thru-hikers.
Yeah, I know. So being a solo hiker, I am not that worried about hiking solo, so to speak. I don't know that I'm a fan, particularly right off the bat, of camping alone, but I'm not necessarily concerned about hiking alone.
So camping alone. So have you done any one-nighter backpacking trips to prepare?
Nope.
Nothing. Just going to go for it.
Just going to go for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's like those shelters are going to be, is there shelters on the PCT, right?
No.
Oh, there's not.
No, that's the AT.
Okay.
No, it's going to be camping. It's going to be tents. And I do get that a lot, actually. Have you, you should go backpacking. You should go, camping. And yes, I probably should. But where's the fun in that? So yes, I'm going to go out there a little raw, or very newbie, I should say, not even a little, but very newbie, and just kind of embrace what it is and have fun with the experience of it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people do that too. I think this was on your podcast, did you interview the guy? He's an author. He wrote a book. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on his name.
Now you're going to make me search it.
Yeah, but I mean, he was someone who, when he was talking about it, had never done anything and just went for it. And I think he was a total city guy, just had never done anything like this and just ended up really embracing it and loving the trail. And he wrote this whole book about it. I really want to read his book.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that happens actually a lot for a lot of people. I've talked to any number of people who have not really done it before, who a lot of times it seems like they come to a point in their life where they need to make a change, they need to get away for a little bit, and for some bizarre reason, the trail becomes that avenue for getting away.
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you feel like the trail is, I mean, you're doing it for your 50th birthday. Is that like the main reason? Or I mean, I think you're on your website it also says you want to kind of prove to yourself that you're still you, that you're still an athlete.
Yeah, definitely. It was about, I've been a little bit injured for the past, what has it been? Probably 7, 8 years. So I seem to run from doing something physically active and then injuring myself. So a lot of my 40s, I should say, injuring myself or pulling something or straining something or whatever that kind of derails me. And then it's a challenge to kind of get back in that flow and try to rebuild again. And it has made me question a little bit of, am I still the athlete? You know, because that's been such a big piece of my identity, obviously, for a very long time. Is that still who I am? And so the idea of getting out on the trail was very much originally to sort of prove that to myself or to challenge that. But it's so interesting because now it's become a little different. And this is just something that's actually really recent, in so much as I feel like there's, and I was having this conversation last night with a friend, I feel like I've come to a moment where I'm kind of pivoting, or I'm in the process of getting ready to pivot career-wise and interest-wise and directionally. And the trail has now become a place to really reflect on what that pivot will be, how it will impact, you know, what comes after it, where do I go, how do I use the skills and the talents and the training that I've got, maybe in a little different way. So the opportunity to be on the trail has become inadvertently become more than just a physical 50th, you know, kind of a thing.
Right. And I mean, I think that's a huge part of what the trail is for. Like we already kind of touched on that, it's just a huge place where people can go and really reflect on what is happening in their lives at that time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And circling back to what we were talking about before, it's Mr. Fabulous, Derek Lugo.
Yes, that's it.
Yes, Mr. Fabulous.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, his podcast totally stood out to me. So when you say like career-wise, are you thinking of just like doing the Hiking Thru podcast full time when you get back?
No, I do love doing it, but, and this is the conundrum that I was discussing with my friend last night, which is I've spent my entire career pretty much learning how to and then managing productions, movie and TV productions and that type of thing.
So that explains where your podcast interest came from.
But that's what I've done. And I absolutely love, almost to probably a sickening degree, I love the process of doing that, of managing it, of, you know, every show has a problem, has a thing, and figuring out what that thing is and how do you overcome it, how do you work around it, like all of those problem solving and managerial and creative in as well stuff. I love that process, but I find that I'm not consuming the same way anymore. You know, like my default, and maybe that's just because I'm so busy doing all these other things, but my default isn't to go watch a movie. My default isn't to turn on the TV and watch a TV series or something like that. And so the conundrum is, well, I love the process, but I'm not as into the consuming anymore. So how does that change maybe where I use my skills, where I use my process?
And that's like, I think a lot of creative people probably have that conundrum because, I mean, a lot of creative people probably aren't turning to the TV so often necessarily.
There's so many, and I don't know if this is just me or not, but there's so many things to do now that are not specifically sitting down and watching something. Or a lot of times if I'm watching something, it's much more about white noise. You know, I'm watching it while I'm researching somebody for the next podcast, or I'm watching it while I'm practicing guitar, or I'm watching it while I'm, you know, fill in the blank type of thing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's just so many interests and hobbies and things you want to do. I mean, it sounds like me too, in that sense. Like, I've always like finding and digging into creative things.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I'm getting more and more into in terms of, trying to write scripts and working on trying to direct and that kind of stuff as well. So again, I feel like the hike is perfectly timed as an opportunity to pivot. Just don't know where I'm pivoting exactly to.
Yeah, maybe you'll pivot to a whole documentary on the AT that'll go like bonkers in Hollywood.
We can only wish, we can dream.
Yeah.
Speaking of documentaries that have gone bonkers, did you watch Tip Tap
No.
thing? You should check it out.
Tip Tap, that's what it's called.
It's actually you can find her under YouTube or Instagram as Elena
Okay.
Osborne, but talking about something that kind of went viral. She put out her first vlog or video documenting her hike, and it was all I was seeing for a couple of weeks even. It was pretty interesting to see how something like that could go viral.
Well, so what was so special about her hike as opposed to all the other millions of people who YouTube their hikes?
I don't think that it's something that was so special about her hike specifically. I think it was about her presentation.
Huh. That
You'll have
speaks
to
a
check
lot
it
to
out.
people though. Yeah. Cool.
Absolutely.
Definitely will check that out.
It's one of those ones where it hits you. It hits you in the heart. It hits you in and I think particularly if you've ever done it before, in terms of a thru hike itself, it feels very familiar.
That's cool. I'm gonna watch that. Thanks for that. And hopefully all kinds of people listening will want to listen to her too. Cool.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I'm curious about your Philippines trip. What was that about?
That was work, actually.
Oh.
Yeah. So kind of at the last minute, ended up in the Philippines helping to manage a production that was over there, or that is over there. But from that was kind of spawning a potential work opportunity that would conflict with doing the thru hike. So I've kind of been a little bit talking about it on my podcast, like very quickly or very briefly as the weeks have gone by. But it was sort of becoming an either or thing. It was either doing the work opportunity or it was going to be thru hiking. And for a very long time, it's really interesting. I was very much thinking that I was going to do the work opportunity. It's something that I've been working towards for 25 years. God love us. Because of that, I had kind of put aside prepping for the thru hike. And then I went to the Philippines, I did the work, I came back and found that the trail was very much still calling me, even though I had sort of put it aside. It took me about 2 weeks of being back and watching that April 4th date getting closer and closer to realize that, yes, I had been working towards this work opportunity for 25 years, but really probably where I needed to be or where it felt like I needed to be was on the trail this summer. And
That's
so I needed
huge. Yeah. I mean, it's like two huge things pulling at your heart.
And it really was. And it was a real conflict and I back and forth and around in circles. And it finally came down to the scales of, yes, I've been working towards this thing for 25 years and it's going to be money and it's going to be a credit, but how else is it fulfilling me? Versus there's this thing, this thru hike, this PCT trail, and I am excited and terrified by this. What is that going to mean? Let alone what am I going to be doing for the next 6 months or, to 8 months or whatever, but also like, what is that going to mean in the longer term of things? Maybe it was perfect timing. Maybe it was just dumb luck, but I saw a quote somewhere which basically said, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I can't remember exactly what it said or what the words were, but it basically said, don't keep working towards the same things because you think you should want them. because that is who you've been in the past, but not necessarily who you are right now.
That's powerful. That's super powerful.
It's one of those things that really makes you stop and think, because obviously we're always evolving, we're always changing. Our goals, our dreams are always changing. And I certainly almost fell into this trap, obviously. But sometimes we get so caught up in what we've been telling ourselves that we want for so long that we forget to actually reflect on, do we still want them? Are they still valuable? Do they still fulfill us in the same ways that they might have 10 years ago, or whatever? And certainly in thinking that through, the answer became obvious that no, it was not going to fulfill me in the same way that being out on the hike and being scared and excited and terrified and adventuring would fulfill me. And who knows what comes after the thru hike? Who knows what the new opportunities will be? Who knows what that pivot will be? But I certainly will never find out if I don't try it. I know kind of what the work opportunity is. I know kind of what that path is, and that path is not as interesting anymore. But who knows what the next path will be?
Right. It's a path of the unknown, which, like you said, is scary, but so exciting at the same time.
Definitely.
So are you totally done with work now? And is the next few weeks just purely focused on prep?
No. I am basically in the process of transitioning everything over to other people who will take it on and actually do the process. And so I'm trying to wean myself off of it, but I'm very slowly kind of turning things over and downloading the information that I have in my brain that is downloadable. So
right. All that invaluable information.
Yeah. So it's not free and clear. It's a combination of a little bit of the work stuff. It's the podcast stuff. It's the prepping stuff. And my big challenge right now is finding a pair of shoes.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think when people thru hike, don't they go through 3 or 4 pairs of hiking boots?
Yeah, no, totally. Or more. Right now, I am in the hunt to find just a pair of shoes, a model, a brand of shoes that doesn't hurt my feet when I go to do my walk of 6 or 7 miles. It was funny. I was literally having a conversation with somebody online, and she was like, walking that many miles a day, that many days in a row, your feet are going to hurt. It's a given. And I'm like, yeah, I know that, but I'd like to not start off with my feet hurting.
Exactly. Yeah. Are you hoping for hiking boots or hiking shoes?
Trail runners more.
That seems to be what most thru-hikers go for, which is understandable. They're a lot more lightweight.
Yeah, no, definitely. They're a lot more lightweight, seem to have fewer blisters, relatively speaking.
Yeah. I mean, I know that Andy, my husband, he started with boots and switched to trail runners not even a week after. I mean, his hike was only 3 weeks, but even 7 days in, 4 days in, he was like, this is ridiculous.
Yeah. If I remember correctly, his description of it was sort of like, I stared into the long, dark night of hiking with these boots and pulled to the side of the road.
Uh-huh. Well, and his boots were just super soaked because it was just such a muddy trail when he was out there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's a much bigger problem on the AT than it is on the PCT.
So what is the weather conditions when you're going to be starting?
It's beginning of April, so it shouldn't be too bad.
And are you starting at the south?
Yeah, I'm starting at the southern terminus. I guess last year was a little wacky because of the storms and the so far above average snowfalls and water and rain and stuff like that. So it was very hard to ask somebody what kind of weather do you expect other than wet. This year we are behind the snowpack and we're behind the humidity thing, or the rainfall thing. So my guess would be that it will be cooler, but the water is probably going to be a problem because it's the rivers or streams or whatever are not going to be very full. But I think that probably also means that there's not going to be a lot of rain happening either. So I will hopefully miss a lot of those not depressing is the wrong word, but every time I talk to somebody about having to sit there in the rain, or I watch somebody's YouTube video and they're videoing or they're vlogging about a day that they've gotten rained on, they look so sad. They look so unhappy and so pathetic and just like, oh,
Totally.
it rained.
Totally. But it's like those moments that, and then when the rain is done, I mean, that's like also one of the best feelings just from like section hiking that I've experienced. That's just like the best feeling that the rain is over and now there's sun. It's just like so amazing.
It's that rainbow phenomenon.
Yeah. So section hiking isn't a thing you've experienced either then, correct?
Nope.
Because you haven't camped.
Not since I was young. Yeah. So no section hiking. The hiking that I have done has been all day hikes. I spent 3 seasons up in Portland, Oregon. So, I've day hiked around Mount Hood. I've day hiked around Mount St. Helens. I've day hiked around some of the trails in, around Mount Hood, that area. So I am not completely naive to hiking, but I have not had to camp for quite a while.
Yeah. Well, you'll get plenty of it.
Yeah. And actually, I feel like I should also make a disclaimer that not in the last probably 5 years, but certainly in my day, I also, since I love the Grand Canyon, I have done multiple, down and back, down to Phantom Ranch and back up all in one day type of stuff. So I know what it feels like to be hiking up those last switchbacks and be like, oh my God, where is the lodge?
Yeah. So is starting off in April, you said there's 50 people. And is that just like how the permit system works? Like 50 people can get it per day?
Yeah. That's how the new permit system works now. And so in October, I went into the queue. I got really lucky. I had a fairly low number. And when your number pops up, you basically go in, you have a certain amount of time and you select the date that you want. And you can kind of see the calendar about what's available. At that point, they were releasing 35 permits. And so you could kind of see where everybody else had already chosen. And there were actually even a few dates that were already crossed off when I got in, and I got in at really low number. So you kind of take what when you kind of want to go, and then you kind of look at what's available around that time frame. And then they open it again in January. And that's where the other 15 are released.
When did you get your permit?
I got mine in October.
Okay. I mean, what is that like? Even like 6 months before you even had to go, roughly.
Yeah.
I suppose that's how it works for most of the trails.
I am not sure how the CDT and the AT honestly work in that respect in terms of permits. It feels a little bit like the AT is sort of you show up and you sort of get the permit from the ranger who's kind of there. I don't know how the CDT works.
So why did you decide to do the PCT?
I'm born and raised in Washington. I live in California now. I very much am a West Coast. I'm very much open range. I'm very much mountains and forests and, glacial lakes and that kind of stuff. So that's always been much more appealing to me from an experience perspective, potentially, than the AT has been. And the heat and humidity of the East Coast, and I say this with exaggeration, but would probably kill me. So that was also that side of it is also not necessarily appealing to me personally.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you've been living there all your life, I mean, you're just acclimated to it already. So good. I mean, because everybody has a different reason that they choose a trail. So PCT and AT obviously are like the most like popular ones to decide between.
Definitely. And I'm actually looking very much forward, having grown up in Washington, having grown up in the foothills of the Cascades. I'm very much interested. I'm very much looking forward to seeing it from the perspective of hiking through the remoteness of the Cascade Mountains. I grew up around Snoqualmie Pass. I grew up around Stevens Pass. I grew up in Leavenworth, basically. So, those places are very familiar to me, and it'll be really interesting to see it from this other perspective.
Yeah, that'll be probably eye-opening and just really, really an amazing experience, no matter what.
Yeah.
So, let's talk about like packing a little bit. I mean, have you like gone through things that you're going to be bringing like a million times, or have you just kind of not even touched that yet?
I am in the process of touching it. So I guess if you want a quick chronology, I got my permit in October, or early November is kind of when they made it official. And then shortly thereafter, this work opportunity happened. I thought I was doing that. And then I left for the Philippines for 2 months. And I literally got back the beginning of February. So I am now kind of scrambling, both from a physical perspective to try to get my body in shape and to get it strong and ready to do this, but also scrambling from the perspective of prepping. I literally earlier this week went to REI and got a pillow and a sleeping bag and an air mattress for it, or an inflatable pad for it. I'm still in the hunt for the right pair of shoes. I still need to get, a stove. I have to figure out my, rain gear versus wind gear. I do have a tent. I do have a pack, but it's a heavier pack. And knowing that I'm going to be taking some heavier equipment with me, meaning I'm going to have a camera, a full frame camera, even though it's mirrorless. I'm going to have a little Osmo Pocket to help video, 4K video and vlog. I'm going to have an iPad with me, both for editing purposes, but there's also potentially a couple of, God love me for admitting this, but there's also a couple of possibly work things that are going on relating to other projects that I need to be able to still connect with and communicate with, and in terms of like looking at documents and things like that. So I know all of the thru-hikers of the world are probably laughing at me right now because I'm trying to have it all, but I will try to have it all. Suffice to say that all those things are very heavy. And so I'm looking at my
gadgets.
pack.
Gadgets add up quickly.
Yeah. So I'm looking at my pack and going, I could really quickly cut 2 pounds just by switching this out. So I'm playing with that right now.
Well, and I guess you'll have to figure it out too. Like, is having your gadgets more important than carrying extra food?
Right. No, and it is very much a thing. And I literally had somebody say to me this past week, and they made a very valid point when they said, you have this intention to do all the things. You have this intention to podcast and to vlog and to post on Instagram and to keep up with work and take pictures and on all of these things. But don't lose yourself in trying to do all of those things, that you lose the opportunity to have the experience.
That's so huge. And we definitely, because like we make a lot of videos when we're out backpacking too, and sometimes we get caught up in that ourselves. And there's times when I'm just like, we're not bringing any gadgets with us. Like no gadgets on this trip. Because you do, like, you're out there to have this amazing experience, and sometimes you're watching it through a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And that's such valid and important information for any podcaster, YouTuber, Instagram, anyone to hear. It's huge.
Yeah.
Such an important thing to remind yourself of.
Yes, she was very wise.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like at the same time, like documenting your adventure is also really fun.
True. And you probably feel the same way, in so much as you sort of have started this ball rolling, and now you sort of have to feed the momentum of the ball. And how do you find a nice balance between that, but also having your experience?
Yeah. And like, especially when it's like something that you're so passionate about, like this like ball that's rolling that you're so passionate about, and still experiencing it. Yeah. It's all a balancing act, and sometimes it's not the easiest thing. Yeah.
Sometimes we get it wrong and we have to rejigger,
but that's what life's about, experimenting.
Yep. Exactly.
So do you have any like favorite resources that you've been using for planning for your thru hike, other than just conversing with every thru hiker on the planet?
I have to admit, I have basically very much taken advantage of the talking to every thru hiker on the planet side of things. and have not really even gone to the extent of looking at people's gear videos. I haven't gone to some of, the other stuff. I did check in with Half Mile Anywhere in terms of, the statistics that he does in terms of questionnaires that he asked, like last year's class, like what was the gear that was out there, and then what was your favorite gear? What did you like using, that kind of stuff. And that certainly helped to influence a few of the purchases that I've made.
Right. And it's good to like have some of those helpful resources. But yeah, like at the same time, it's like you also can't research everything out there.
Yeah, no, and that's very hard. And also it's very personal, the things that one person uses. And it's very funny. I hear this a lot from the people that I talk to, and I'm like, okay, so what was, particularly with shoes, what were the shoes that you wore? Well, the shoes are very personal. Like with the stuff that I wear may not work for somebody else. And I think that that's a very valid point, both with shoes, but also with everything else. You like, what works, what fits you, and it may not work for somebody else.
Absolutely. Yeah. I know these thru-hikers who thru-hiked the AT, and their thing was cooking like really, really fancy meals every night. So they would like pack in like steak and like all this fancy meals for like a week's worth of like high quality Top Chef meal. Whereas like other people, their priority is not that. They're happy with oatmeal for dinner every night.
Yeah. Well, and I actually hear from a lot of people, it's pretty funny that particularly once you start getting going, they're so exhausted that is a lot of times where people move from stove to stoveless because they're so exhausted. They don't even want to have to heat the water.
Right. They just want to
sort of
cold soak.
I know. Does not sound appealing at this precise moment, but who knows how I'll feel in a month or so.
Exactly.
I may be completely in line with that less is more thing.
Right. Perspectives will change as time goes on.
Yeah, exactly.
But with resources, though, there is this one cool resource that maybe you'd want to check out. It's called Right on Trek. They're like a fairly new company, and they have like every trail out there, pretty much, like every big trail. And you can read trip reports of people, and there's like a whole planning resource.
I'll definitely check it out.
Yeah, they're a pretty new company. We talked to the owner the other night.
Definitely. I will check it out. Any place that has a nice, concise summary, or I guess actually what has become more important to me is not just necessarily a summary of like what gear was used or what have you, but almost more importantly, why? Why did you like your gear? Why did you choose this over that? Because I think that that's a more universal thing than I just liked this pair of shoes or I like this sleeping bag. Because from the perspective of a quote unquote newbie thru hiker, I don't necessarily know what I should be thinking about, what will be important when I get out there. And so to have somebody who has that perspective say, hey, on my pack, having the hip belt pockets was so important because I would stuff them full of this and that. I would do this and that with it. Having a pack which had these features to it was so important for me. That information is priceless because now I can go to purchasing something with an educated understanding of what I probably will need or what will be helpful potentially.
Well, yeah, and especially for you, like someone who is so new to backpacking in general, too.
Yeah.
Like that is really, like you said, invaluable information. So yeah, I mean, I think of someone like me, like I've gone out and backpacked a million times, so I probably know what I would want. I just don't have the mentality to thru hike.
But more importantly, like, could you explain why you like the pack that you like? Could you explain why you do stove versus stoveless? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I do stove because I enjoy a good meal at the end of the day.
A warm meal?
Yeah. I haven't hiked enough miles in a day to want to go stoveless.
It's pretty funny from this perspective at this point. The thought of having a cold meal like that at the end of the day is a little depressing So it will be really interesting to see if my perspective changes once I'm out there and I'm hiking the miles and I'm exhausted, whether that will still be important or still be a mental kind of pick me up or emotional pick me up.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I remember when we were on the AT just for like a section last summer, and there was a thru hiker. He was probably like a mid 50 guy, and he was just so exhausted that he didn't even eat that night. He just got to his shelter and just slept. He didn't even eat, and that just like boggled my mind.
I think that falls under the self-care.
Yeah. And that's like something that's like so, I think like worrisome too for me as someone who's never thru hiked, like, because this guy was, he was alone. I don't know the last if he was hiking with anyone at all, but yeah, it's just like, the self-care out there. You definitely need to like keep in check with yourself. And obviously like your tramily will keep in check with you, but I think just keeping in check with yourself when you're spending 6 months with yourself,
Yeah, definitely. How did you feel having Andy out there, even though it was obviously much shorter, because he did go through some shit and he was certainly by himself a lot. And
yeah, I was worried. Even before he left, I told him, I was like, I'm just like worried you're going to go crazy. Like when you come back, like I'm worried you're going to be spending so much time alone and not talking to anyone. You're going to be like this crazy person when you get back. And he's like, it's not going to be like that at all. And like, he's super introverted. So like,
so he's predisposed.
Yeah. Like he was very happy to be doing that. But yeah, I mean, I was worried, but he did have like a GPS. So he was checking in with me, like when he got to his site each night, when he was leaving each day, when he was like taking his lunch break each day. He checked in with me, and the Superior Hiking Trail is pretty well traveled, but like the northern part where he started, there isn't a ton of people. But once you get to all the popular state parks, he ran into way more people. So I knew he would see plenty of people. But yeah, I was still worried. But the check-ins helped. But yeah, I was just, I think his mental well-being, I was worried. And then that day we went up there, the week after, to bring him his shoes, like he was just like a zombie. Like and that was only a week in.
Did you wonder if he was going to complete it?
He, at that point, he was like, should I just pack up and go home?
That's like, right. You applied some tough love.
I did. I was like, no, you wanted to do this. Like, stay out here and do this. But yeah, he looked pretty beat, and just like he hadn't been in civilization for a while. And I mean, like I said, that was only a week. So like for these like thru hikers who don't see civilization for like 2-3 weeks, that's even more scary.
Yeah. You go native very quickly.
Yeah. How often is there towns on the PCT?
Generally, I believe when you're not in the Sierras, it's about every 3 to 5 days. When you're in the Sierras, it's much longer. And particularly if it's a heavy snow year, it's even worse because it takes you just longer to get through. But I believe the longest carry at those points can be up to like 8 or 9 days.
Okay. So yeah, like getting close to a week and a half.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like also a lot of food that you have to carry too. Cause like Andy only had to carry 3 to 4 days worth of food. So what kind of food are you planning on bringing?
Not sure yet. I certainly am going to go with a stove, and certainly my plan is to carry it at least through the Sierras, because I think having that ability to at the very least warm water is important, particularly in the Sierras, even in a low snow year like it is this year. But food-wise, my body functions better with protein, with a higher concentration of protein. So I am probably going to be carrying some protein powders, that kind of stuff with me. I do like oatmeal. So I was going to try to do some kind of oatmeal stuff, potentially for breakfast. I was going to try to do some like protein powder and maybe some sustained energy or something like that in water during the day to be sipping on. So, and that's a little cheat from my triathlon days, but something to be able to consume calories as you're going along, as you're drinking water.
Yeah, keep those electrolytes going.
Yeah.
Exactly. I know Andy used those on his thru hike, and those were huge.
Yeah. No, definitely. And it's funny, I was literally just in Walmart yesterday, and I was walking through the aisles and saw the Knorr sides. And so I picked up one pasta side, one rice side, and an Idahoan mashed potato side. I just want to taste it.
Those are good. We've had those.
So I thought I would make some before I even get out there and just see if I even like the taste of them as a pre-trial test.
Right. And you'll probably quickly learn that any food at the end of hiking for so many miles per day is going to be amazing.
Yes. No, I definitely see that one happening. It's just trying to keep the concentration of protein higher, to keep the concentration of fats higher. My biggest concern is, I don't think that my body will function very well eating like a kindergartner.
A bunch of candy.
Well, a bunch of candy and chips and high carb and Pop-Tarts and that type of thing. And certainly going into towns, you have the hiker hunger and you want to eat a lot, that's probably not something that I can get away with as much as, people in 20s and 30s.
Yeah. I mean, that amazes me that people are able to do that, just like their candy bars. And yeah, I'm with you there. I don't think I could do that at all. Yeah. But the good thing is, there are a lot of options for like protein and stuff. It's just like, those dehydrated meals can get pricey and add up quickly. Yeah. But like things like the Knorr sides, they're like $1 a piece and sometimes even cheaper.
Yeah. No, I literally, I have to admit, I have not purchased a Knorr side before. And so going through the checkout aisle yesterday, and they were ringing them up at $1 a piece. And I was just like, I see why poor thru-hikers buy them.
Yep. Can deal with that. Right.
Exactly. Top ramen, Knorr sides. The price is right.
Yep. Easy Mac.
Exactly. Yeah.
Tortillas and peanut butter.
Oh, speaking of peanut butter. So that is going to be that is definitely my thing. So I have been known in the real world to take a spoon and basically dip it, have some peanut butter, and then literally just put honey on the spoon with it and just eat it like that. So I may try that on trail.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. That's like a perfect little energy bite.
Yeah, just remove the bread piece of it and.
Yeah, exactly. It's just carrying a jar of peanut butter can get heavy.
True.
But
definitely
there is powdered peanut butter. It's just not as good.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Oh, so I mean, anything else? We've talked about a ton. Anything else to add to this journey that you're embarking on? When's your actual 50th birthday?
Beginning of May 6th.
Okay,
so I'll be out there a little over a month. So I'll still probably be, or I should still be in the desert section by that time. Yeah.
Awesome. And you're gonna, I definitely want to follow your journey, but obviously, like we already said, don't live through social media.
Well, I guess it's don't live through social media, but I also know, there is the podcast stuff, but there's also obviously all the personal friends trying to kind of keep up on what's happening. And I want to share this journey with them. I know a lot of people who are interested, and I'm sure most thru-hikers probably hear this, that, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of friends who say, oh, I would love to be able to do that, or, whatever. And for whatever reason, they never find the right time, the right moment to do it. But I feel like the journey, as beneficial as it will be for me, it will be equally as beneficial for them to see it happening, to experience it even a little bit through me type of thing. particularly, I feel like so often, and so many conversations that I've had lately have been with people saying, oh, that's so scary. Oh, I would never do that. How could you? Why would you? Where do you even start with that? And so I feel like sharing yes, being scared, being terrified of doing it is good, because you see having the fear and you see doing it anyway.
Right. You see vulnerability.
Yeah. And so I hope I am cognizant enough on the trail to be able to share that.
Mm-hmm. And I think the trail does that to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And it just opens people up. I mean, like, even when we've been out on the trail for a few days at a time, like, we've just met people and I've had just like amazing, deep conversations, like very like meaningful conversations with people. And then, you never see them again, but it just opens people up in a way that you really can't otherwise, because you're just taken away from the rush of life.
Definitely. The opportunity to connect with people in a true and deep way, to share stories, is unique, I think, in this world that everything is a soundbite. So I'm very much looking forward to that, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing everybody's different stories.
Mm-hmm. Just like the variety of people that are out there that you'll meet will just be fascinating in itself.
Yeah, exactly. And as somebody pointed out that I've spoken with, for whatever reason, even all of these people who come from all different places, both in their lives, materially, whatever, and everything in between, have found themselves at this particular place at this particular moment.
Mm-hmm.
So we're all in that moment together.
Exactly. And it's just like, all the different walks of life people come on. Like you said, it's fascinating.
It's a fascinating social experiment.
It is. Oh, all right. I mean, anything else to add? Where can people find your podcast?
Well, you can find my podcast on Apple and Spotify and Google Play and all of those places. But you can also find my podcast on our website, which is hiking-thru.com. And you can find us on social media, on Instagram at Hiking Thru Podcast, on Facebook at Hiking Thru. But most of the postings and stuff like that are happening on Instagram. And then, the postings that I do while I'm on the trail will probably be kind of split between the podcast Instagram kind of thing, but also on my own personal Instagram account, which is Egan_here, if anybody wants to follow that.
I will. You got one.
Perfect.
And another question was, the Hiking Thru podcast, that's only you, right? There's no team behind you?
I have one other person who's helping me with the social media, website, stuff like that. But yeah, otherwise, in terms of like the podcast themselves, that's pretty much just me. So that will be an interesting thing to figure out once I get on trail.
Yeah, totally. I don't think I know anyone who's posted podcasts while thru hiking. You might be a first.
Yeah, we'll see if it's brilliant or crazy.
Yeah, an experiment. Well, awesome. This has been really cool to talk to you.
It's been fun to kind of catch up with you and kind of hear what's going on over on your side of things.
Yeah. So we will continue following you, and happy trails in almost a month.
Yes. Very soon. Very, very soon.
Yeah. It'll be here. All right. Well, enjoy the rest of your evening.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We love sharing these stories with you through the Hiking Thru Life podcast, and we're so grateful that you listen to this podcast. If you'd like to support the Hiking Thru Life podcast further, we have these amazing new t-shirts and water bottles. The t-shirts come in 4 colors, and the water bottles are perfect for trails, adventuring, or daily use. Consider checking them out at hikingthrulife.net/shop.
Use the code PODCAST and receive 10% off your first order.
You've been listening to the Hiking Thru Life podcast. Peace, love, and hike through life.